I'm Jessica. I'm in my mid-20s. It's a story from a long time ago, so I'll share it as a way of getting it off my chest. It's about my parents. I recently got the news that my mom passed away. It's something I couldn't share with my friends until now, so I want you to hear it. I've been quiet about it, but hearing that my mom had been crying recently made it hard for me to keep silent. I couldn't talk to the people who were kind to me or my friends. If I talked about it, it would be the end. They would definitely dislike me. But staying silent felt like deceiving everyone, and sometimes it weighed on my heart. I lived with my dad and mom, just the three of us, when I was little. I was about 5 years old. To be honest, we were poor. We huddled together in a rundown apartment, the three of us. But as a family, we were happy. My mom was kind, and my dad, though quiet, was a hard worker. My mother always worked at home. I think Dad was probably a day laborer. It was before I started elementary school, so my memory is a bit hazy. Back then, I didn't really understand what Dad's job was, but I remember he always left in his work clothes and came back dirty. Our meals were always leftovers or expired snack breads. I don't think Mom cooked much at home. I played with scraps next to my mom as she worked at home or went to the park by myself. And then, Mom and I would go to the store just before it closed late at night, buying discounted or half-price items. Since they were leftovers, we couldn't choose. But I was happy when there was a leftover pastry with chocolate in it. Well, there was a reason we were poor. Growing up like that, I never really felt it was tough. My parents were kind. And when you're born into poverty, you don't think of it as sad, because I didn't know any other way of life. Actually, life has been harder since I started living away from my parents. One day, as usual, we bought leftover food at the supermarket. I received a subsidized lottery ticket. If you collect 10 pieces, you can get one lucky draw. I think it was the supermarket's end-of-year raffle. The familiar cashier lady gave them to us. Probably even though we didn't spend enough to earn them. She must have given them to us specially, because she said, "This is our little secret," and gave them to me. I was so happy collecting those tickets. I think there was a trash can at the supermarket. People who weren't interested in the raffle would throw their tickets away. I collected them from there, or sometimes got them from strangers. And finally, I collected 10 tickets. It wasn't exactly the official way to get them, but let's overlook that. This story takes place before I even started elementary school. Just for context, I never went to preschool or kindergarten because we were poor. Saying we were too poor to afford it might not be entirely accurate. There were several reasons my parents couldn't send me to preschool, and being poor was just one of them. If things had continued that way, I might not have been able to go to elementary school either. Looking back, I'm not sure what their plan was for me. Going back to the raffle story, when I had those 10 coupons in my hand, I was thrilled because it meant I could enter the draw. On the day of the draw, I remember rushing to the supermarket, holding my mom's hand. I handed over my crumpled tickets to the cashier. Then, I spun the raffle drum. The grand prize was a gold ball, as the supermarket staff told me. I hoped for the gold ball as I spun it. My mom probably wanted something like third prize, maybe some rice. But, to my surprise, the ball that came out was gold. I had won the grand prize. It was a trip to Hawaii. I didn't know what Hawaii was like or even what a trip meant, but winning the grand prize made me purely happy. My mom, on the other hand, didn't seem too thrilled. I wondered why, but I was too distracted by the ringing bell and the staff's frantic behavior to ask. I went home buzzing with excitement. I couldn't wait for my dad to come home so I could tell him about the grand prize. I wondered if he would be happy. When my dad came home from work, I showed him the travel voucher right away.
"You're lucky?"
He said, patting my head. My mom watched me with a wry smile as I excitedly told them about it. That night, I woke up for some reason. I heard my parents talking in whispers. I felt like I shouldn't get up, so I just listened from under the covers. I heard them talking quietly.
"We can't go on this trip. What if we get caught?" "You're right. But it's been 5 years since then. and nobody will know it's us.
We'd have to get on a plane, right? There are police at the airport. Isn't it risky?
They check thoroughly when you go overseas, but domestic flights, nobody checks your identity.
I guess so.
It'll be fine. We'd never get to go on a trip otherwise.
I didn't understand what my parents were hiding or what they were afraid of at the time, but understanding that we might be able to go on the trip made me happy. What's a plane like? Is Hawaii far away? I fell asleep imagining these things. Anyway, our family was going to go on that trip to Hawaii. My mom seemed worried about something right until the end and wasn't too keen on going, but my dad seemed excited. Then, the day of the trip came, and we all headed to the airport. I couldn't have imagined that this would be the last time we'd be together as a family. In the end, we never made it to Hawaii. Not only that, we didn't even get on the plane. You know how you check in at the airport? You show your ticket at the counter and all that. Embarrassingly, I haven't been to an airport since then, so I'm not too sure about the correct terms. My dad was submitting our tickets at the counter and going through the process. After my mom and dad were done, it was my ticket they were checking when the person's hand stopped. I guess you call it a walkie-talkie. The person had an earpiece in and started making a troubled face while holding it down. Then, suddenly, I was the only one denied boarding.
Sorry, but we cannot check you in.
They said that out of the blue. I didn't quite understand, but I kind of got that I was the only one who couldn't get on the plane.
What? Why? My daughter has a seat on the plane, right?
My dad was panicking, but the staff behind the counter just repeated the denial of boarding without giving a clear reason. My mom was flustered, and my dad was visibly angry at the staff. I was already close to crying at this point. After some back and forth, a line had formed behind us. Then a somewhat authoritative man with a different color tie came out from the back. The man said,
"It's causing inconvenience to other customers in line,"
and led our family to a separate room. That room, kind of like a conference room, felt really sterile. My excitement for our first trip plummeted. Seeing my parents' anxious faces, I started to sob. Then, two men different from the one who had escorted us came into the room and took my parents away.
"Wait a minute. There's been some mistake. We're just going on a trip."
My dad protested.
"It's a case of mistaken identity. It's not us. Let us go,"
they each said. They were then dragged away, their upper arms firmly grasped. Their pleas became inaudible as the door closed. Left alone, I burst into tears out of fear and helplessness. I have never been separated from my parents before, no matter how poor we were. After a while, a woman came into the room. She seemed to be an airport or airline employee, judging by her uniform.
Don't cry. Look, your mom and dad are just talking to some people. Hey, let's go eat something delicious together.
She said that as she led me to what seemed like an employee cafeteria at the airport. There, I was treated to ice cream. I had never tasted it before. I remember being surprised by its coldness and sweetness. I had little experience with sweets back then. I only knew the taste of jam or chocolate in snack bread. Forgetting about crying and my parents being gone, I quickly became fascinated with the ice cream. Thinking about it, children are really simple. I instantly grew attached to the lady who gave me the sweet treat. Sitting in a room full of people in uniforms, I received various candies and juices from everyone, sitting contentedly on a meeting room sofa. The adults around probably felt sorry for the poor kid separated from her parents. People came and went, all of them paying attention to me. Surrounded by more sweets than I could eat, I was thrilled. I was enjoying this blissful moment. Then, two women in suits arrived, saying they were there to pick me up. One was from Child Protective Services, and the other introduced herself as a police officer. I was taken to another room, where the CPS worker examined my entire body. They were probably checking for signs of abuse. They examined me thoroughly and took notes in a notebook. Despite our poverty, my parents had taken relatively good care of me. So, there was no way I had any signs of abuse. The two women debated whether to take me to the hospital, but ultimately, I wasn't taken. After that, I was led away from the airport by them. The adults who had entertained me gave me more candy than I could carry, waving goodbye as I left. Looking back, they were incredibly kind people. Initially, I was taken to the police station, where I was asked all sorts of questions. Things like my name, what my parents were like, and what our daily life was like. I answered everything honestly. Then, I was put in a car again and taken somewhere else. I was told that from that day on, I would be living there. It was a child welfare facility, and I grew up there until I graduated from high school. From that day, I never lived with my parents again, because both of my parents ended up behind bars. In the end, they never came out from behind those walls. The reason was they were convicted of murder. My parents were criminals, wanted by the authorities. That's why they were arrested at the airport. The reason my boarding was denied and we were held up was because it was discovered my parents were wanted criminals. The police wanted to stall for time until they could arrive. Howard, who identified my parents as wanted criminals. I never found out. I wasn't informed about the details of these events until I entered middle school. I only learned this fact then. After being separated from my parents at the airport, I was taken to a child welfare facility by a social worker. About a week later, my maternal grandfather, a stranger to me at that time, came to see me. To me, he was just an old man, as I didn't know what a grandfather was. He became my guardian, but as an elderly man living alone, he couldn't take me in. Plus, the neighborhood knew about my mother being a wanted criminal. Taking me in would mean facing the stigma of harboring a murderous child, and imagining the kind of treatment I would receive was easy. My grandfather, thinking of my well-being, chose not to take me home. He had accepted that his daughter became a criminal, and he felt responsible for raising a criminal. He decided to face the criticism from society without running away or moving. Perhaps he didn't want me to bear the burden of responsibility he carried. My grandfather was very kind to me and often visited the facility. He has passed away now, but all my memories of him are fond. He told me about my parents' crimes when I was entering middle school. It seemed he had intended to take the truth about my mother's crime to his grave, but I managed to get it out of him. Some adults were indiscreet, not sparing their words around me, and hearing them, other children threw those merciless words at me. Surrounded by words like criminal's child and murderer's daughter, I was at a loss. Back then, I didn't understand the meaning and was just scared by those words. Neither the facility staff nor my grandfather could explain it to a small child. Nobody would give me a detailed explanation no matter how much I asked. So, when I was about to enter middle school, I told my grandfather I wasn't a little kid anymore and wanted to know about my parents. And he told me everything about them. I was the child of parents who were on their run for being wanted criminals. How they managed to have me under those circumstances is a fact I'll probably never know. We lived in poverty because we were hiding from the police. My dad could only take on odd jobs because we were hiding our identities. My mother could only do a small side job that allowed her to work without revealing her identity. That's why we were poor. The crime my parents committed was murder. Before meeting my mom, my dad had been married to another woman. In the midst of that marriage, he met my mom and started an affair. Essentially, he was cheating. Dad thought of my mom as his destiny and had no intention of ending the affair. Then, my mom got pregnant with me. That was me. Dad didn't have any children with his first wife. They had tried for a long time but never had any. However, when the affair partner whom he felt destined to be with, my mom, got pregnant, he decided to divorce his first wife. When Dad proposed divorce, his first wife became hysterical and refused to part ways. Despite many discussions, she wouldn't consent to a divorce. Meanwhile, I was growing inside my mom. Mom was determined to have me, whether or not Dad divorced. But when his first wife found out, she threatened to kill my mom and the unborn me if he left her. Hearing this, my parents decided to kill his wife and carried it out. In a way, I was the reason my parents became criminals. That's probably why my grandfather didn't want to tell me this story. After they conspired and killed his first wife, the police quickly found out, and both became wanted fugitives. After that, I was born, and our family of 3 began our life together. For my parents, I was the life they wanted to protect, even if it meant committing a crime. That was me. That's why I never experienced any abuse. I feel sorry for the murdered ex-wife, but I was raised with a lot of love. Even as a young child, those memories are vividly imprinted in my mind. Even right after hearing this story, knowing that because of me, many people's lives were thrown into chaos, living became difficult at times. But when my grandfather told me this story, he made me promise never to commit suicide. So, bound by his words, I am still here in this world. There were certainly adults around me who said it wasn't my fault. However, overwhelmingly, more people shunned me as the daughter of a murderer. I still blame myself sometimes. But since I wasn't directly responsible, there's no way for me to atone. My grandfather kept me from bearing this burden. What kind of restitution was made to the victim's family, and how did they react? They didn't tell me anything. They kept me away from the incident entirely. I still don't know what's right. Apologizing for something I wasn't even born to witness would only confuse them. I understand that wanting to atone might just be for my own satisfaction, but I lack the courage to live as the family of a murderer like my grandfather did. So, after graduating high school, I've lived hiding the fact about my parents. I think I shouldn't be happy, because I'm living a lie, taking the easy way out. Sometimes, the guilt is crushing, making me hate everything. Hearing that my mom passed away in prison, I just needed someone to listen. Talking won't lighten my guilt, but I felt like I'd lose my mind if I kept it in. I've promised my grandfather, so I'll never end my own life. But sometimes, it gets overwhelmingly hard.